Elliott in the backfield. Prescott. Elliott got knocked down. Throws wide open. Jason Witten to win the game.
Friendly fire got the Philadelphia Eagles. They collide, and Jason Witten wide open for the game winner.
Witten not much of a factor tonight. Barely called his name. Of course, he's been the heart and soul for so many years. And of all things, wins it at the end. That was 12 plays in overtime, including a huge fourth down risk, which paid off.
Watch the collision on the back end. It's the two safeties, Rodney McLeod, Malcolm Jenkins, run into each other. McLeod's going to pick off Jenkins on the back end right here. And there goes Jason Witten for the game winner.
He picked a heck of a time for his first touchdown of the season, didn't he?
Oh, man, they all contributed a little bit.
I've been enjoying football this season a lot. I don't know about you. That was a particularly fun game to watch since they won it in overtime. And football's great to watch. I don't know that it's as much fun to play, right? I mean, you may have noticed Romo has not played this season. And the reason for that is his collarbone was broken playing. And maybe you wonder, like I do sometimes, why do people do that? I mean, if this is your job, you're out there training hard, working hard, you have to build a lot of muscle, do a lot of training to have the necessary skills to do the game, and then you're going up against people who spend all week doing the same thing, and they are building muscle and they are training to hit hard. And it's inevitable if you're playing this game that sooner or later you're going to get hurt. You're going to break something, or you're going to strain something. It's going to happen. That's just the nature of the game. And you wonder, why do people endure all of this? Why do people go through not just the hardship of the training that's involved, but the very real danger that they face every time they step out onto the field? And add to that, having to deal with the sometimes fickle and unkind comments that the media and fans will make about your performances. And you think, why would anybody do this? Why would anybody subject themselves to this kind of torture? And I would imagine that the people who are doing this really believe that the rewards involved in doing this outweigh the disadvantages, right? You can earn a lot of money, and it opens up things even after your career as an athlete is over. You can be a commentator, you can be a coach, and if it's a game you love, it really doesn't feel like you're making this huge sacrifice, because the reward is so much greater than the pain you have to endure to receive the reward. That's kind of what we're talking about in our passage today. When it comes to this faith in Jesus Christ we're being called to exercise, the author of Hebrews is very honest. He's very full disclosure about it. If you choose to put your faith in Jesus Christ, it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. There's going to be hardship involved. There is no way around that. But is the reward worth it? That's what we're going to be considering today. Oh, great. Somehow I got disconnected here. I will try once. If it doesn't work, okay. Y'all will have to advance for me. Please advance the slide. I've titled today's message, Faith's Reward. We'll be in Hebrews chapter 11, and we'll be looking at verses 23 through 31. Now, we've been talking about faith, and we've been talking about some of the downsides to it, but also some of the reasons we want to choose faith in Jesus Christ. We've talked about how putting our faith in Jesus Christ causes a change in our relationship to God, so profound and so impacting that we are transferred completely from the status of sinful to the status of righteous because of this restored relationship with God. We've been talking about how faith connects us to these future things that God is at work doing, and that faith is the only way we can connect to those things that are out ahead of us. And we looked at Abraham and how faith led him to leave behind his family and move out where God called him to do. And not only that, but to embrace, as his son and grandson would do after him, a whole life lived as a sojourner, moving through this world, geared toward what God is doing and trusting that it's worth it even to live our whole lives, not having yet received what we were promised, because the one who promised is faithful. And even that journey is worth the cost because of what awaits us ahead. And we've been talking about how faith connects us to things that go way beyond anything we could ever accomplish. It allows us to bless people in ways we are powerless to make happen. It gives us the ability to impact people around us for the good, far beyond our immediate power to do that. We talked about how faith enabled men like Isaac and Jacob and Joseph to pronounce blessings on coming generations of the amazing things God was going to do for them. We're going to continue talking about some of the benefits that come from putting our faith in Jesus Christ. Please advance the slide. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and did not fear the king's edict. We begin with the example of Moses. Rather, we begin with the example of Moses' parents. It was the faith of Moses' parents, thank you so much, David, that led them to hide Moses when he was born. Now, this was the situation. The population of the Hebrew slaves in Egypt had grown so large that the Egyptian overlords were fearful of the great number of Hebrew slaves, and they knew if they ever rebel against us, they have the numbers to beat us. So they said, we need to curb their population, so let's tell them to kill all the baby boys who are born. And that way, we're not afraid of a bunch of women. If they all grow up, that's fine. We'll deal with them. But kill all the men, and maybe we'll be safer. And that was the edict. If a male child was born to a Hebrew, they had to drown him in the Nile. Now, Moses' parents, when Moses was born, refused to do that. This was an act of disobedience to the ruling authorities. There was a clear edict from the king. This is what you were supposed to do, and the parents defied that. And we're told, the author of Hebrews makes the point that this was an act of faith. Now, picture yourself in the situation of Moses' parents. They are absolutely powerless to really guard Moses' life. And they defy the king's edict in what seems like a hopeless act of defiance, which should, by all natural means, result not only in the death of Moses, but the severe punishment of the parents for disobeying. Because you all know how it works with a baby. You can't keep that hidden. They're loud, they're noisy, they don't stay put, right? How long are you going to be able to keep a baby hidden? They managed 3 months, and that was quite a feat. But their act of defiance was connected to no plan, no power, no strength on their part to actually succeed in saving the boy's life. Just looking at it, it seemed like an exercise in futility to try to do this. And yet, something about that act connected with God. They chose life rather than wicked commands. They chose life rather than obedience and even their own safety and comfort. And God honored that by actually saving Moses' life. By faith, Moses, when he was grown, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, having chosen rather to be mistreated with God's people than to have sin's temporary enjoyment, having considered the insult of the Christ to be greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was focused on the reward. So we talked about Moses' parents. Now let's talk about Moses himself. Now, the way Moses' life was saved miraculously was that the Egyptian who found the baby was actually Pharaoh's daughter. And when she found the boy, she recognized this is a Hebrew slave boy, and the parents are trying to hide him because they don't want to kill him. And rather than kill him herself, she was moved to compassion, and she adopted the boy so that he grew up in the court. He grew up in the halls of power of the mightiest nation on earth at the time. And he was raised in the greatest privilege anybody could have known at the time. Not only was his life saved, but he was moved as high as you could be moved. But faith in Moses' case also led to a kind of rejection of Pharaoh and what he represented. Because when Moses was grown, when he was a grown-up and made his own decisions, he reached a point in his life where he said, you know what, I don't want to be part of Pharaoh's family. I don't want that to be who I am. I'm a Hebrew. And I see that the governing class I grew up with, these people are behaving in a wicked manner. They are oppressing fellow human beings. And I don't want any part of that. I don't want to be identified with this group of people. I refuse my identity as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Now, making that choice in Moses' case led to some significant changes in life situation. He went from having all the comforts and privileges of being an insider in the royal court to being an enemy of the royal court and pursued as an enemy of that court. And here's what the author of Hebrews has to comment about that choice that Moses made. He chose that he would rather be mistreated with God's people than to enjoy sin. Now, here's the thing about enjoying sin, and let's be honest, sin is enjoyable. Nobody would do it otherwise, right? I mean, if it was just awful through and through, nobody would sin. You know, it's like eating vegetables, you know? I mean, how many people have a problem with that, you know? It's enjoyable. The problem is, it doesn't last. The problem is, it inevitably sours. It inevitably goes bad. And sin is a lot of fun for a moment. Sin can be a lot of fun even for years. But God tells us very clearly, it's never going to end well. It cannot last. So yeah, he had access to being part of the oppressing class and all the power and the rush that comes with wielding that kind of power over people. That's an attractive thing. To be able to have somebody killed because they look at you the wrong way, that kind of power is attractive. And it is enjoyable for a time. But Moses said, you know what? I don't want to enjoy these things because I recognize these things do not last. This is a temporary thing. So if I have to choose, I would rather be mistreated with God's people than enjoy all the temporary enjoyments that may come from placing myself in opposition to God and His people. He words it another way. He considered the insult of the Christ to be greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. Now, Egypt at this point is the power. It is the greatest nation. It is the wealthiest nation. And it had access to tremendous treasures. And this is the evaluation Moses made. He compared siding with God's king, siding with the Christ, and the insult that accompanies that choice to all the riches that the Pharaoh's court could place before him. And when he weighed the two in the balance, he said, the Christ, even with the insult, is greater wealth. It is a superior riches than everything Pharaoh's court can offer me. You may think, this is anachronistic, right? What do you mean Moses chose the insult of the Christ? The Christ hasn't even come when Moses is doing all of this. And I want us to understand how the author of Hebrews is looking at this idea of faith. What he's telling us in his letter is God has communicated to us through history. He begins by saying, God has communicated in previous times in many ways and through many manners through the prophets, but now he has spoken to us through the Son. That's how the book of Hebrews opens. So this same God who had communicated to Abraham and said, I'm going to use your descendant, your seed, to bless all the families of the earth. I'm going to give you a place to live, and I'm going to increase the numbers of your family so that you can become my instrument of bringing redemption to the world. That begins with Abraham. It continues through the patriarchs, and it reaches Moses. And when Moses chooses God and his people and the promises God has made over Pharaoh's court, he is ultimately pointing forward to that promise of blessing all the families of the earth through this descendant of Abraham, who is the Christ. So, in a very real sense, when Moses is putting his trust in God and casting his lot with God and what he is up to, he is putting himself on the side of the Christ, who is actually the ultimate expression of the promises God has been making. Putting his faith. And that's why in the whole chapter 11, all these heroes of the faith predate Christ. But they are put forth as examples of what it means to trust in Jesus Christ, because God, who worked in the lives of all these men before, has now revealed himself so fully and amazingly in the incarnation in Jesus Christ. And we're talking about the same God. Jesus, throughout his public ministry, kept making that point. If you really loved God the way Abraham loved him, you would embrace me the way he embraced my coming. Moses looked forward to my day and celebrated it. Jesus said that. Faith in God ultimately, true faith in the true God, ultimately cannot end up in rejection of the Christ. It's the same God. So he says, here's the reality of the Christ, though. This is God's promised king. How was God's promised king treated when he came to earth and walked among us and taught and served and healed and freed people from the demonic forces at work in this world? He was rejected. He was crucified. And there's a tremendous amount of rejection in the world against God and his Christ. So Moses said, I would rather, and I guess this is what we need to understand. If you choose Christ, you choose the insult that accompanies him. Let's face it, choosing Christ is not going to win you popularity contests. It's not going to make Facebook blow up praising you. It's not going to happen. It's not going to make you a celebrity. It's not going to get celebrities to support you and sing songs for you and do stuff. It's not going to happen. because there is a rejection of the world against the Christ. So when we cast our lot on His side, we have to know that there's going to be that insult attached to us as well. To some degree or another, people who don't want anything to do with Christ will, by extension, also not care too much for you. If you say, Jesus is everything to me. Jesus is life. Without Him, there is no life. He's the only reason I'm living. If that's who you are and somebody wants nothing to do with Jesus, that's going to splatter you. Trust me. So Moses says, okay, I have, on one hand, I can choose the insult of the Christ. Or I can choose everything the Pharaoh has available in his storehouses of wealth. You ever fantasize when the lotto gets really big? How your life would change if you just happened to buy the one winning number. It's that kind of choice. Here's all this money, all this wealth, all this power, all this glory available. It landed in his lap. He did nothing to earn it. He just happened to be in the right place at the right time. He had all that on one hand. On the other hand, he had the Christ and the insult, the reproach, the mistreatment that is going to accompany that choice. And he said, which of those two is greater wealth? Which of those two is greater riches? And he said, the Christ. You see, all the storehouses of goodness and kindness, all the storehouses of grace and mercy, all the true hope to be found in this world, all the glory, all of that is bound up in Jesus Christ. There is no greater wealth to be found in this world than Jesus. There is nothing better we could find than Jesus. Moses made that choice. This is better. I don't care about the mistreatment. I don't care about leaving the court and never coming back and living the rest of my life out in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of goats and ungrateful people. I will endure that because Christ is better than not Christ with whatever else you put it. By faith, he left Egypt and did not fear the king's rage, for he persevered as seeing the unseen. Your Bible might have the unseen with a capital U. It's vague. But this is the thing that led Moses to make this choice of leaving behind all this. People probably thought he was crazy. Man, you had it made. You had everything anybody could ever desire, and it was yours already. Why did you give it all up? And Moses' thinking is, I found something better. Better than all of that. And he left Egypt, and he faced the rage of the Pharaoh, the most powerful man on earth. He made an enemy of the worst person he could have chosen to make an enemy of. And he didn't fear him because he persevered. Now notice that word, persevered. Don't ever think that following Christ is a bed of roses and lollipops. There's going to be hardship. There are going to be moments when it is not easy. There are going to be moments when people are going to hurt your feelings. And worse, it may cost you your possessions. It may cost you a job. It may cost you your life. Moses persevered because he was seeing what is unseen. Now, we could describe God as the unseen. He was focused on God. But I think in the context of what the author of Hebrews has been saying here in chapter 11, there's a whole realm of the unseen out there, the stuff that God is doing, and that faith is our only access to that unseen world. He was focused on God and all the stuff God is up to, that faith is our only way to see. You'll never figure it out apart from faith. But he focused his heart and life on that. Faith involves a very serious choice with tremendous consequences for the day-to-day living we're going to do. I hope I'm not skipping verses here. I can hardly see. This phone is so tiny. Okay. Mine's one of those big old tablet things that are, I'm sure David knows would be embarrassed to carry around. Okay. By faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood so that the destroyer would not touch their firstborn. Now we get to some other stuff. Things that faith, and notice how he's kind of progressing historically here. We've talked about Abraham, we've talked about Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, and then we get to Moses, and we're continuing on. And he says, by faith, Moses has kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood. Let me just explain very quickly. This was the first time Passover was celebrated. It was not an act of remembrance, it was an act of faith. It became an act of remembrance because of what God did after the first Passover. But the first time they did it, all they had to go on was God's promise. God had done 9 amazing plagues and had yet to succeed in Pharaoh saying, okay, you guys can go. So you could look at this as God had failed 9 times. And here we come to number 10. And things haven't gotten any better. In fact, they've gotten worse. The Pharaoh has increased their workload because he says, you guys must have a lot of free time if you want to go party. And he increased their workload. And we reach a point where God tells Moses, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to kill all the firstborn in Egypt. I'm going to send the angel of destruction, and he's going to do this. And after that, Pharaoh is going to let you go. And God said, the way you guys are going to be saved from death is you're going to kill a lamb, and you're going to use the blood on the doorposts of your houses. And that when the angel of destruction comes through, he will pass over the houses that are marked with the blood. And they were told to eat this dinner fully dressed to go. So no lounge pants, no slippers. No, you've got your shoes on, you've got your clothing tied on, ready to go. Your walking stick at the ready. You are ready to go. And you prepare this meal in haste. Don't stop to leaven anything. Just bake the bread without leavening it and eat it quickly. Because by this time tomorrow, we will be free. We'll be out of here. And it was a tremendous act of faith for Moses to tell all the people of Israel, really, this time it's going to work. This time it's not going to get worse. This time we're going to get out of here. And just follow my instructions and we'll all get out of here. It was an act of faith. By faith, they celebrated this Passover. They sprinkled the blood on the doorposts. And this faith broke them out of slavery. And this Passover becomes a tremendous testament to how our relationship with God works. We are slaves, maybe not to the Pharaoh of Egypt, but to everything that court represented. We are slaves to sin and death. And we are powerless to break free. And God invites us to enter into a journey with Him where He will break us out of this prison and lead us into a journey of freedom. And there is a Lamb whose blood will prevent our destruction. The first time this was done, it was a complete act of faith, and God delivered. Not only did he break them out of prison, but he actually saved them from the death that the angel of destruction was supposed to bring upon them. By faith, they crossed over the Red Sea as through dry land, which the Egyptians attempted and were swallowed up. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who had disobeyed, because she received the spies in peace. So we have some other things that happened after that first Passover. After the Passover, they leave Egypt, and then Pharaoh lets them go, but he immediately regrets it and sends his army to chase all the slaves down. And you might say, as I read the story, I don't see a whole lot of faith. The Israelites are really scared, but they did follow Moses into this area where there was no exit. They went into this area where all they had in front of them was the Red Sea, and all they had behind them was the Egyptian army. And they put themselves, because they were following the instructions that God had given through Moses, they put themselves in this situation where utter destruction was almost certain. And yet, by faith, they crossed that Red Sea as though they were taking a stroll through the desert. It was dry land. So let's compare, in their circumstance there, what the outcome is for people who choose faith in God as compared to the outcome for people who choose to not have their faith in God. Now, they crossed the Red Sea on dry land, and the Egyptians said, well, if they did it, we can too. And they chased in right after them. What happened to them? They drowned. Now, that illustrates very powerfully the difference that faith makes. The people who had put their faith in God were rescued and delivered and saved, whereas those who tried to accomplish the same thing without God died. They failed completely at succeeding in this. What about Jericho? When they finally reach the promised land, and it'll take a while, but they get there and they come in and they face the most fortified city in the land of Canaan. The walls of Jericho are ginormous, and this is an impregnable fortress. It has its own source of water internally. They can wait you out, and this is basically, once they cross over the Jordan, this is the first place they face. And these are the instructions God gives Joshua. Tell the people of Israel, this is how we're going to deal with the walls. We're not going to build siege ramps. We're not going to try to invent the trebuchet. We're not going to do anything like that. We're not going to try to burn the gate down or something. Get the Levitical priests to carry the ark, and get some other priests to blow trumpets, and tell them to go all the way around the city. And just do that, and do it for 7 days. And on the seventh day, let's just do it 7 times. We'll do seven circles on the seventh day. Now again, if you're Joshua and you're the military leader and you tell your commanders, this is our plan to attack this fortified city, the natural response would be, you're crazy, that's stupid, that'll never work. Were you going to play music at them? What's that going to accomplish? But they did it. And it was because they trusted in God. It was this faith that accomplished what they could never have accomplished. All they did was go around the city. And on the 7th day, at the 7th circling, when they blew the trumpets, the walls just went boom. And the city was exposed, defenseless. And it fell. Again, you have on the one hand the people who put their faith in God and accomplished the impossible. And you have the people who thought they had it all figured out and didn't need God, and they died. Compare it. Which is the better outcome? What about Rahab? In the city itself, there was a woman, and it's interesting. Rahab is always, seems like she's always, I haven't tracked this down, but I suspect it might be true, that she's always mentioned as the prostitute. how would you like to be known as that? You know, Rahab the prostitute. That, you know, not just Rahab, you know, that's not a last name, you know. But Rahab the prostitute, she's known throughout the Bible as the prostitute. And it's because of what that represents. When the people of Israel are coming into Canaan, God says, I am intervening in human affairs, and this is one of the moments I'm doing it. And the wickedness of the people in Canaan has reached such a level. The harm to the innocent and the weak in their culture is so profound that I am going to destroy them. So my giving you the land is also going to be the means by which I'm going to bring judgment to bear on the people of Canaan. And at the heart of what was so wicked about this was the fertility cult. This was a thing that men had invented because they like sex. And they said, the gods, in order for our crops to be productive, for us to have food to eat, for all of the animals to not miscarry so that we have plenty of milk and meat and all these things that we need to survive, the gods demand that we exercise and channel our sexual energy so that they have all the spiritual juju they need to make everything fruitful. That's the basic structure of their belief system. What it translated into was women were forced into prostitution. And they were made temple prostitutes, and men had sex with them. And not only was it not condemned, it was considered a civic duty to do this. And young women would be, this would be the life they would be put into. God said, I'm done with that. I'm not going to put up with it. I'm going to destroy this. And she represents the aspect of the fertility cult that made it so enticing, because people like sex. And the offer of sex freely, or as some great, even a civic duty. Wow, I mean, you don't even have to feel bad about using other people. You get to be celebrated for using women this way. And it was very attractive. She represents the heart of the problem. I would suggest, though, she represents it as a victim of that system. But this is what was to be wiped out, this whole fertility cult. And she's a prime representative, almost a leader, you could say, in a sense, in this. And yet, she was not destroyed when Jericho was destroyed. Why not? Because she chose faith. She did not perish with those who had disobeyed. And the whole status of the whole city of Jericho were, these are people who had set themselves against God in every way. And that was her identity as well. But there came a moment when she heard about this God and this people that were coming. And she chose to extend to that God in faith. By the providence of God, she came into contact with the spies from the Hebrew people who were scouting out the land before they came in. And she had a choice to make. She could say, okay, I'm one of these Jericho people. I found the guys who are trying to give information about our weaknesses. I'll turn them into the authorities, and we will save ourselves from their attack. We will protect ourselves from their attack. She could have chosen that. She could have said, this is my identity. This is my people. This is who I am. I need to look out for my own. I would suggest that kind of thinking maybe cause for some of the bitterness we've had recently in our political life. Everybody has their tribe that they're furiously defending, and I think there's been a breakdown in unity. She had a choice to make. Do I stick with my group? And that's not the choice she made. When the spies came to her, she received them in peace. Basically, when the enemy showed up at her doorstep, the enemy being God and his people, she sued for peace. She held up the white flag. And she said, I don't want to be an enemy. What needs to happen for me to be part of you? How do I change status? How do I change from this group to the other? Because I don't want to be the enemy of God. She received them in peace, and because she extended herself toward God in faith, not only did God spare her life, not only did she save her life, but she became instrumental in God's promises to Abraham to bring this blessed one to the earth. She was an ancestor of the Christ, an ancestor of King David. She was the mother of Boaz, who also married another questionable woman, Ruth. And she becomes an integral part of what God is doing. The rest of the city, those who had chosen enmity against God, were destroyed. So when we talk about what reward comes with faith, what reward accompanies faith, it really is life and death. It really is utter ruin on one hand. No matter how pleasurable the temporary enjoyments of thumbing your nose at God may be, inevitably, the end result is destruction. On the other hand, you have rescue. On the other hand, you have life. On the other hand, you have God intervening amazingly, miraculously on your behalf, so that what destroys everybody else cannot destroy you. Now, that choice involves some suffering. It involves willingly taking on an insult. It involves choosing to be mistreated when you know if you just denied Christ, the mistreatment would stop. It involves a real choice. And what I want to suggest to you this morning is be like Moses. Weigh one thing against the other. Where's the reward? What's going to be the reward of this or that choice? How's it going to play out? This is the challenge laid before us. Choose faith in Jesus Christ. With all the insult that may involve, with all the suffering it may involve. Because Christ is better. Because the reward He lays before you is better. And just as we've seen in these examples, many of those rewards are not just future in the by and by things. The crossing of the Red Sea was a right now deliverance. The saving your life when everybody else in Jericho died was a right now deliverance. It's not that God says, oh, well, trust in me, suffer a whole lot, and then if you've suffered enough, you'll be worthy to enjoy the reward. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying that the reward of having Christ, even with all the pain involved, is by far outweighs the pain of not having Christ. Of losing everything. We're going to sing a song of invitation. I'd like to ask the musicians to come up front. As we're singing, I just put before you this simple call to faith. To embrace a faith that is not hesitant, a faith that counts the cost and is willing to endure whatever must be endured because Jesus is better. If that's where you are this morning, I want to ask you to come forward. There are people here who are going to pray with you and encourage you. Let's all stand. Steve and Patty, could you help me? And Walter and Liliana, could you help me here at the front? Please come while we sing.